The guardrails of democracy are continuing to resign. J Porks, Dyze in your house. Exclusively on East Coast Radio. A 1,000-mile journey begins with one step. Progressives took that step on November 6th. The journey's not over, but we took a step in the right direction.
If you don't know what Staten Island is, it's like New York's abortion that lived.
Did you see New York 11 elected a Democrat? New York 11 is Staten Island, the most Trumpian place in New York City. Elected a Democrat. Don't try to tell me it wasn't a wave. Robert Mueller isn't the only person investigating Trump now. We have the House Intel Committee is now chaired by Adam Schiff, and they have subpoena power. And he will use it. And he will get to the bottom of this, like he's been trying to do for the last 2 years, and Devin Nunes has been stymieing him. Devin Nunes is no longer the chairman. The midnight runs to the White House are over. I made a promise to the listeners of East Coast Radio that if the Democrats did not mess up November, that if November 6th went our way, that we would have a little fun here on East Coast Radio. And if you stay tuned, I promise you this. Along with our fighting fascism and trying to save democracy, we will have a little fun. Because we earned it. Keep it locked to East Coast Radio.
Representing Staten Island.
Remember, we got Dyze in your house at the end of the week. We got the J Porks podcast at the beginning of the week. Every week, East Coast Radio for the least heard voices. Get us on Patreon, patreon.com/JPorks, and follow us on Twitter at East Coast Radio. Let's punch fascism in the face, one podcast at a time.
If you don't know what Staten Island is, it's like New York's abortion that lived. Representing Staten Island. Staten Island was no joke.
Hey, yo. Who's in the house? Dyze in your house. What is the word, peeps? What goes on? It is Friday, and we are back with another action-packed edition of Dyze in your house. Exclusively on East Coast Radio for the least heard voices. This is the pre-show, the post-show, the prelude to the J Porks podcast, where it's a show that we try to make, that we try to create a section that we can remove from the J Porks podcast so we don't have a 4-hour podcast about the fall of democracy in America, the live stream. So, every week on East Coast Radio on Friday, we have brand new episodes of Dyze in your house. They're sort of like mini podcasts. They're short, about 20-minute bursts. Got a little fun background music going on in the background. Some of this background music that we're going to turn down a little bit lower. And, you know, we usually, like today, we're going to be talking about Jim Mattis. As you probably saw, the title has something in Mattis in it that I have not decided yet. And we will get into all of that. But, so we don't have to waste 20 minutes on that on the J Porks podcast, which is coming out on Monday. On Monday, it's a very special Christmas Eve edition of the J Porks podcast. We are going to be talking about tons of things. We're going to be talking about Christmas. We're going to talk about winter solstice. We're going to be talking about why trees are actually been brought indoors. And we're going to talk about why a lot of things you have been told are lies. Lies and fibs. Fibs and lies. It's Reciprocity Day, December 25th. The day of reciprocity. But we're also going to talk about fun things like Roger Stone We're also going to talk about fun things like the Mueller probe, the latest in it. We're going to talk about Michael Flynn getting smacked down by the judge. That was funny transcripts to read, man. But first things first here on the J Porks podcast. Breaking today, we have Jim Mattis has decided to step away from his position as Secretary of Defense. Now let's talk about why that's important. Couple of reasons. One, Jim Mattis has told insiders, he told everybody, all of the Beltway basically knows that Jim Mattis was not resigning from his post. Jim Mattis was going to need to be fired from his post in order to be removed from that post. He would need to be removed. He was not going to quit. He was not going to resign. When all these hateful policies come through, you start, people on TV start saying, people need to resign in protest over this. Like, how half already resigned in protest over the way they've been being treated. That's another thing we're getting into on Monday's episode of the J Porks podcast. That's Matthew Whitaker not taking the ethics advisement. But anyway, continuing on. Jim Mattis, Secretary of State. No more. He's out in February. Also, I said it means a couple of things, so let's get into the other thing. The other thing this means is that this is another, air quotes here on, guardrails of democracy. That's what everybody said. We had people in there. We had Master, Mattis. You had these generals in the cabinet, lifelong patriots. And you thought, probably not you, but people thought that these people were going to make suggestions and tell, okay, Trump, this is how it is. And that's not exactly what happened. That's not at all what happened. This motherfucker, actually, seriously, think about it. Think about it for a second. Seriously, we all thought this asshole would just get some Republican cabinet and just do nothing, let the Republicans be Republicans, and he would secretly, quietly try to make money off of the office of the presidency. That's what we thought it was going to be. Really didn't think that this asshole would actually sit behind the Oval Office and think he knows something about running a country and actually make decisions that are going to affect the rest of our lives. And the difference between my life and his life is about, 50 years lifespan? Because I'm going to be on this earth. We are going to be on this earth to reap the repercussions of being the only country at the G20 not to sign the climate bill. Of this isolationism that we're doing, this America First crap that's going on. So what I want to do is in a minute, we're going to read Jim Mattis's resignation letter, if that's what you want to call it. Because wording is very interesting there. There's words used, and you should pay attention to, things that are said. So there's that. Jim Mattis is going to be gone. And you know what? We might as well just, right now, we'll get to it. How about now? I have been privileged to serve as our country's 26th Secretary of Defense, which has allowed me to serve alongside our men and women of the Department of Defense, of our citizens and our ideals. I am proud of the progress that has been made over the last 2 years on some of the key goals articulated in our national defense strategy, putting the department on a more sound budgetary footing, improving readiness and lethality in our forces, and reforming the department's business practices for greater performance. Our troops continue to provide the capabilities needed to prevail in conflict and sustain strong U.S. global influence. One core belief I have always held is that our strength as a nation is inextricably linked to the strength of our unique and comprehensive system of alliances and partnerships. While the U.S. remains the indispensable nation of the free world, we cannot protect our interests or serve that role effectively without maintaining strong alliances and showing respect to those allies. Like you, I have said from the beginning that the armed forces of the United States should not be the policemen of the world. Instead, we must use all tools of American power to provide for the common defense, including providing effective leadership to our alliances. NATO's 29 democracies demonstrated that strength in their commitment to fight alongside us following the 9/11 attack on America. The Defeat ISIS coalition of 74 nations is further proof. Similarly, I believe we must be resolute and unambiguous in our approach to those countries whose strategic interests are increasingly in tension with ours. It is clear that China and Russia, for example, want to shape a world consistent with their authoritarian model, gaining veto authority over other nations' economic, diplomatic, and security decisions, to promote their own interests at the expense of their neighbors, America and our allies. That is why we must use all the tools of American power to provide for the common defense. My views on treating allies with respect and also being clear-eyed about both malign actors and strategic competitors are strongly held and informed by over 4 decades of immersion in these issues. We must do everything possible to advance an international order that is most conducive to our security, prosperity, and values, and we are strengthened in this effort by the solidarity of our alliances. Because you have the right to have a Secretary of Defense whose views are better aligned with yours on these and other subjects, I believe it is right for me to step down from my position. The end date for my tenure is February 28th, 2019, a date that should allow sufficient time for a successor to be nominated and confirmed, as well as to make sure the department's interests are properly articulated and protected at the upcoming events, to include congressional posture hearings and the NATO defense ministerial meeting in February. Ministerial. Further, that a full transition to a new Secretary of Defense occurs well in advance of the transition of Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in September in order to ensure stability within the department. I pledge my full effort to a smooth transition that ensures the needs and interests of the 2.15 million service members and the 732,079 Department of Defense civilians receive undistracted attention of the department at all times so that they can fulfill their critical, round-the-clock mission to protect the American people. And that is Jim Mattis, stepping down from his post as the last adult in the room. Allies, partnerships. These are things that were mentioned several times in Jim Mattis' resignation letter. And also the key final paragraph, or the final piece there, where it says, you have a right to have a Secretary of Defense whose views are more aligned with yours. Which means, you know what? Maybe children getting killed at the border, not my thing. Possibly. Maybe. Because remember, he said he's not resigning. Maybe Mattis, was... Trump told him to do something. Mattis was like, no, we're not. That's not a thing we're doing. Maybe this is because of Syria. That's something we're going to cover big on the Jay Porks podcast. But, maybe it's because we're pulling troops out of Syria, to benefit Putin and Assad. Possibly. Do we know? We don't know. Here's what we do know. We do know that another guardrail of democracy has fallen. So who is left in the cabinet who knows how to politic? Who is left? Exactly. You don't have anybody. Really, the person at doing their job, and I hate to say this, but the best person at doing this job in this rising fascist regime is Sarah Sanders. Because I don't like her. And I don't like that she lies to the American people daily. Well, it's not really daily because they don't have press briefings. But she's given instructions. You need to go out there and lie about this. And not fold and not bend. And she does. Other than that, and maybe this is why you can't 25th Amendment Trump. Think about it. The 25th Amendment requires the entire cabinet to get on board. The entire cabinet can't be on board if, every month there's a new cabinet member in and out. You can't get everybody on board with this. That's like having a party, getting everybody in a room, and you're trying to get all these people to agree on one thing, but one person leaves and another person shows up. Another person leaves, another person shows up. You don't know what's going on. So how can you 25th Amendment somebody that doesn't have a steady cabinet? Doesn't have a chief of staff? Mick Mulvaney. Yeah, huh. That guy looks like if you turn toothpaste into a human. Okay? So, that's enough with Mick Mulvaney over here. Christie turned him down. Alright. So basically, long story short, Jim Mattis, Secretary of Defense, guardrail of democracy, stepping away from his position. He claimed to everybody that he would have to be fired to leave that position. The letter says that he is resigning. So there is that. Is it a protest? We don't know. All we know at this hour is another guardrail has fallen. Okay. On Monday, there was a Christmas edition of the Jay Porks podcast. We are talking about Syria. We are talking about Roger Stone. We are talking about Matthew Whitaker. We are talking about New York City trying to legalize that evergreen recreational marijuana. We're going to be talking about it. Is it going to happen in our lifetimes? Will the store open before 2025? I'll take... If we're taking bets, I'm betting no. Jay Porks. Dyze in your house. Hey, yo. Jay Porks here. Recording my own commercials as per usual. But I am here to tell you about going to patreon.com/JPorks, and you have the opportunity to help support Least Coast Radio by becoming a Least Coast Radio head. How do you do that, you say? Well, there are 3 different tiers to choose from, where you can find yourself bonus content, bonus features from the Jay Porks podcast, from Dyze in Your House, from all things Least Coast Radio. Now, what are those features? Well, they're bonus shows. They're getting shows early. They're getting exclusive artwork mailed to the address of your choosing monthly. You can interact with all the hosts here on Least Coast Radio. You can get shout-outs on the podcast, behind the scenes stuff. That's on Dyze in Your House and the J Porks podcast. You get them both here on Least Coast Radio. Dyze in Your House is usually the primer at the end of the week. The J Porks podcast is the long show. What we do at the beginning of the week to get you going, to take in everything that happened. But I need some help. And how you can help Least Coast Radio is by following us on Twitter at Least Coast Radio, going to patreon.com/JPorks, becoming a Patreon, becoming a Least Coast Radio head. And, if you don't want to do any of those things, you can smash that subscribe button on iTunes or YouTube. And, it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt to share the podcast with your friends. So keep it locked to Least Coast Radio for the least heard voices. We're here fighting fascism, saving democracy, but we're also going to have a little fun. Keep it locked.